how do you attract those buyers? How do you then tag them to those use cases so that you can then categorize and analyze that data? Of course, with AI these days, things have become a lot more easier, but even then, you need to build some metadata around that information that you're trying to generate.
Hi, welcome to tomorrow's Best Practices Today. I'm Clark Newby, and today I'm so excited for our guest. Today I'm joined by Usha Iyer, and she's a little different from the typical guest you might see on our podcast. She's actually President and Chief Revenue Officer at Hivebrite. Hivebrite's an online community engagement platform, and so she's there leading that team across sales, marketing, and customer partnerships, optimizing the organization, optimizing the processes. So I think she's going to have some great higher level insights for us. She consults with startup companies, so she's seen a lot of different scenarios through her career. She's a board member and advisor for Swerve, with a V, two V's. And so she's really been down in the nuts and bolts of helping high growth organizations manage their path. She came to her president and CRO role through software development. She came up through the software development side, through product management, marketing, and ultimately to her position here at Hivebrite. So she's got a great 360-degree view of organizations, particularly tech organizations, how they run, how they innovate, and how they grow. So welcome, Usha. It's great to have you on the podcast.
Thank you, Clark, and it's a pleasure to be here.
I want to just dive right in because obviously, even in the intro, right, and at this point in time, everyone is maniacally focused on growth. How can we grow and what are the right ways to grow? How does the philosophy of growth change through different stages of the organization as the organization gets larger, as the mission expands, et cetera? So it's not that hard to get overinvested and focus on growth, on getting, doing the quarter, getting a new client in. But just because you can get the client doesn't mean you can serve the client, right? And I know one of the things that you're focused on is a lifestyle mindset of not just getting that business closed, but how can your business grow in a sustainable way by having the right relationship with the customers that you bring into your fold. Can you speak to that a little bit for us?
Yeah, sure. It's interesting when you've been on both sides where you're actually making the sausage and then now you're selling the sausage in the market. You kind of, like you said before, do have a 360 view and, you learn from your mistakes pretty fast, I would say. But that's also important, right? You have to be able to make some mistakes to know your mistakes. So, as a startup, it's almost good to not worry too much about sustaining your growth. You want to try and hit that growth as fast as you can, and you sign up any and every customer that comes your way. This is not new. Every startup company out there does it. And you hit your first million, a few millions in the beginning, and then you realize that hey, you're not always successful. There are places where you fail miserably. And it's important to then take note of that and be able to pivot from that point and start to go into a direction where you can drive some repeatability in success. Mm-hmm. So, here at Hivebrite, I joined the company as a CPO, and we were less than $2 million in recurring revenue, had not raised our Series A round of funding. And that's when we were that type of startup that was growing at all cost. We were about less than 200 customers at that time, small SMB customers, and we had a product that was really cool always. And so it was an honor to be able to step in the shoes of, the product leader, build out the team. And through that journey, I realized very quickly that we would not be able to differentiate ourselves unless we kind of went up market. So we quickly pivoted from being SMB provider to a provider of community solutions for mid and large enterprises, and that journey came with a lot of learnings, because we might, in certain cases, we pivoted too fast, in certain cases, we pivoted too slowly. But ultimately, we landed at a place where we could tell what customers were good customers and what customers were not so great customers. So moving into
Yeah.
the CRO role subsequently helped me to kind of bring that learning into this role and define. Actually, in fact, Clark, if you remember, you helped us do this. We did a segmentation exercise and defined customers who are seem to be in our sweet spot, our ICP. And then we started testing in the market, we defined use cases, and then we started to narrow our focus and get a lot more deliberate about who we are going after and who we are
Yep.
not going after. So yeah,
Right.
it's a journey, and I would say you don't learn everything up front during that exercise, because now you have to test, gather data, define processes, make the whole organization sort of fall into lockstep with your way of thinking, into this go to market framework. And then it takes a while, 12 to 18 months, I would say, to get to a point where you can see where you're succeeding repeatably versus not. So yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, it's a journey.
What I loved about our work together was it was outside in focus, right? We were looking at the use cases. You you had so many, for those that aren't familiar with Hivebrite, again, it's an online community engagement platform. And if that sounds very horizontal to you, trust your instincts. So there's you could use it for people collaborating on just about anything. And we had the customer base doing almost anything with it. And so, how are you going to pivot, like you said, from those early days of making the quarter, figuring it out, getting enough at bats to figure out what things are good for, just be able to step back and look at the patterns that are going on out in your customer base,
Mhm.
and determine where you're going to be focusing your effort, right? Um, so, I mean, I guess just in the broader sense, maybe you could share a couple. How do you look at that? How do you look at what's going on in your customer base and how you deploy once you have the customer? How do you determine your priorities in not just targeting, but in customer support, in the product roadmap? Because you've got a very horizontal solution. You have a lot of priorities coming into you. What does Hivebrite do to digest all of that and make the right decisions?
Um, yeah, I mean, I think that's all about building the go to market machine, right? And ultimately driving towards what I would call as alignment across all the functions in the business. So once you've got a hypothesis that this is where you want to test the market, you think that you've got some repeatability there, uh, you got to set up the processes behind it. So it starts from even just what's your marketing message look like. How do you take those use cases and message it into problem statements in the market? How do you attract those buyers? How do you then tag them to those use cases so that you can then categorize and analyze that data? Of course, with AI these days, things have become a lot more easier, but even then, you need to build some metadata around that information that you're trying to generate, right, in your go-to-market machine. So you capture that demand, you start categorizing it, and then you start to track it. You set up your sales processes to then be able to engage with that buyer early on with messaging that resonates, value statements that resonate, success metrics for those. Every community defines success differently. So
Right.
how do you take a use case and associate certain types of KPIs to define success for that use case? Then you go and engage with your prospects to see if that type of value message resonates during the buying cycle. You then help them build a business case around those types of metrics. And then once you acquire that logo, and then you start the process of onboarding that customer, you want to reiterate whether those problem statements are really the ones they want to tackle early on in their journey. And then as they start the process of launching and going live, you got to set up the baseline for where they were prior to launching your product
Right.
versus after, and then start to capture data, that can help you establish whether those, the hypothesis that you had up front when you sold to
Yeah.
that customer is playing out the way that you expected it to. And believe me, so much changes as you're establishing your segmentation framework and your buyer personas and your value statements, and throw into it size of organization, the support the organization has, sometimes even simple things like compliance requirements come in the way of being able to completely unleash the power of the product. So there are a lot of real life factors that play into it, not to mention the fact that the buyer, sometimes the executive buying your product, has a very different requirement from that program versus the administrator of your product, who's the day-to-day user,
Right.
versus the
Yep.
end user of the product. So the value could come from any one of these three dimensions. So you got to build out a pretty comprehensive picture to really know what's working and what's not working. But
Yeah.
if you start to do everything all at once across, say you have 20 use cases or more, you can get lost. So you pick one or two or three and prioritize, and then start to learn from those, and then start to expand that from there. So that process takes a couple years, I would say, but it pays out at the end, and you start to see patterns emerge, and then you can start to build upon those patterns so you can drive growth in specific areas faster than the others. And that kind of gets you to that point where you can start sustaining growth over there while you continue to experiment with the rest.
Yeah, the market starts to explain to you a little bit, right?
Exactly.
What's working, where maybe you should be spending your efforts, where the competitors sometimes explain to you what's working and what isn't, right? So
Yeah.
all the things that are going on in the
Yeah,
market.
and the biggest thing, Clark, at that point for me, the learning was to really be able to say no to those use cases which just were not made for us. I'll give you, I mean, again, to make it real, at Hivebrite,
Yeah,
it was very clear to us. You remember the word you helped us actually coin was the graduates play, which is people who are trying to build community for the first time, were not right. We're not in, didn't need a product like ours. We were too much of a Ferrari for them. But the people who actually had an existing member base, an existing community manager, and some sort of business imperative to get that community to the next level were the perfect buyers for us. Those were the people who had graduated from just testing whether a community even helps
yeah.
them or not to run their business. So knowing that we did not want to go after the people who are not graduated, the creators, so to say, versus the brands, right, was a good learning through that exercise. And we deliberately stopped selling to creators. And I think that helped us a lot with retention because we were targeting a segment of buyers who were already established in terms of buying community solutions.
No, that's great because uh, retaining your customers is the ultimate measure of the value you're delivering, particularly in a SaaS subscription model, right? And so it's about the value that you're able to deliver to them. It's not just like how you're building out your product portfolio and how you're uh, kind of paying off your vision. And so some of that is the solution, but some of that is uh, the practices of how to use the solution. So, where do you guys sort of draw the line, or how do you think about, particularly in a subscription based world, the value you're delivering through the technology versus the value you're delivering through all of the successful customers that you already have and helping your new customers get up to speed, helping them, those that have graduated, helping them get into their postdoc world of really excelling with Hivebrite.
Actually, it's a great question. And before I even get to how do you tailor their post-sales experience beyond the product itself, I would say another very important aspect of driving maturity in your go-to-market is getting your pricing and packaging right as well, right? So since you brought up the word value, it occurred to me that in fact, there's a book right here behind me called Power Pricing. I like to go back to some of these basic books that I learned I've read over the years. And there's a very powerful statement in there. You got to establish a price and value equilibrium, right? So your price has to be commensurate to the value that you're able to provide to your customer. And when you have a highly horizontal and configurable product, you could have a tendency to gold plate your product and offer a lot of capabilities up front, a lot of perceived value up front, charge a high price, but it could take a while for that product to actually deliver value because it takes time, say for a community, for example, to get off the ground.
Yeah.
So there had to be an adjustment that we had to make during that process to be able to go back and revisit our pricing and packaging to allow for buyers at different stages in their journey to be able to right size what they purchase from us, right? When you have as rich as a product, you got to be able to do that. And so that was a great exercise. And again, we had to launch some packages, some pricing, learn from that and adapt. But once we got that right, actually, it made it a little bit easier for us to be able to go into the market and, find the buyer and almost get the buyer on board at the stage of the journey that they were on and make
Mm.
it easy for them to buy.
Meet
And
them where
then,
they are, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
meet them where they are and then get them on board, help them become successful, and then expand them once, they're able to get the value that they wanted out of it. So, I think that part was important, followed on by the right kind of onboarding methodology. And
Mm-hmm.
onboarding is the most critical step, I think, in the customer's journey because at the time they're purchasing from you, they're on a high. They see the outcome, that they see the vision, they see the dream, and they're buying on the promise of the dream, right? But
Yeah.
then once they are in that post-sale cycle, the first few months are so critical to get them to be able to get to that point of value, first value quickly. And so
Mm-hmm.
that's where bringing in best practices from other like customers, where it goes back to the segmentation again. So you can go find similar customers at a similar stage of maturity with a similar use case, with similar outcomes, similar verticals, sometimes nonprofits, for example, getting them to see those types of examples and see what's worked for them and sharing those best practices during the onboarding journey and prevent, like, almost holding them back from trying to run before they can walk is really
Mm.
an important
Interesting.
step in that
Yeah.
customer's adoption journey. So that's the adoption phase, having the onboarding team not be support people, but really be consultative in helping the customer to adopt the product in the best possible way, I think sets you up for success. And then from there on, it becomes easier, right? Because the customers now become experts in your product. I can't tell you how many customers know our products better than we do, right? So, and then
Well, and they
they
bring back like you have customer advisory board meetings or something, and they
yeah,
come back with like, look what I did.
yeah,
Like, how did you manage to?
yeah.
Yeah, where did it even occur to you? Right, because it's being driven by their needs. And I love what you're saying about that. The adoption and getting folks on board. You need those. You need those customers, like you say, they've drunk the Kool-Aid, but they're going to need, particularly your champion's going to need an early win, right? They need to
Mhm.
show that this was a good decision. If you're going to, A, retain them, and B, have the opportunity to expand in the account, help them solve other problems, right? Do you, um, how directive are you? Do you guys tend to be, or what's your kind of philosophy around expansion? Do you kind of check in with the client every 6 months? How are you working to find trigger points where there's an opportunity for you to discover with your clients more things you can do together?
I would say we are still maturing in that journey, but what we've started to do is to be very intentional in when you even have expansion conversations. The worst time you could be having an expansion conversation with a customer is during their onboarding journey, right? They have not even realized the first
Sure.
value from the product. But in
Yeah.
the meanwhile, like any other
It's
SaaS
like
company,
slow down, right?
yeah,
It's like, let me.
exactly. Like any other
Yeah.
SaaS company, we put out features every week, every month, right? We have a monthly release.
Yeah.
Um, that doesn't mean just because we've developed a few new feature, it doesn't mean we go to a customer who's still in the onboarding phase and have them look at that feature or a new module or a completely new capability and pitch them that feature to with an intention to have them expand. That's not the right moment in time. um, so I think what we are beginning to do is use that same segmentation framework that we built Clark now to slowly understand what customers, could get more value from your product through what types of features, right? Mapping the product capabilities to the customer segments based on the use cases and the go to market framework is something you have to do before you go to every customer and start pitching every feature. So we've got just getting to that point. So we've kind of been a little more, I would say, reactive on the expansion motion to date because we are still figuring out how do we get more quote unquote salesy without making it sound negative
Yeah.
with our customers, right? So we let them come and educate themselves. We've been fairly good about educating customers through our own community for our customers so that they know what's coming and they can chat with each other and understand what they're using.
It's a
Once they
community, right? I mean,
yeah,
there's the Hivebrite community of Hivebrite users for
yeah,
what they're doing with all their communities,
yeah.
right?
But I think we could get even more intentional as we further deepen our understanding of the value that we are delivering to our customers and the pain points we're solving and how, what does a journey look like? You got to also map out a customer's journey. They could go from step one to step two to step three. So for every customer that's in step two, what would be the most appropriate set of new capabilities they introduce in their own communities to get to step three? So we haven't gotten as prescriptive. So, but that'll be the fun part next, right? So
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, this is all reminding me. I mean, one of the things that I love about you, Usha, is you're so intentional and thoughtful and strategic about the ways that you're looking at not just go to market strategy, but how it fits within the strategy, the broader strategy of the organization, and maintaining that alignment across leadership as well as um, the teams that each of them are leading. Um, how do I think so the foundation I think of intentionality is understanding the business from every different aspect. How do you keep yourself, how do you get across the organization, and how do you in that C-suite stay aligned across these fundamental building blocks that you need to be stacking to grow the business and scale things and to get leverage from your scaling?
yeah, I think I mean, think about Hivebrite. We are a global business. We have about 12, 1,300 customers at the moment. We are spread across the world. Our CEO is based in France. Our CFO is German. Our chief product officer is also based in France. I'm here in the US. Our chief customer officer is here. So I think, we are very much a global and remote team, right? So it required, to use your word, we had to be very intentional in how often we meet. How do we really think through what meetings are for strategy, what meetings are for financial planning, what meetings are for running the business. So we kind of established a series of meetings like that among us. But I have to say, the one thing that makes it easy for us is that all of us in the leadership team are very customer forward. So we are thinking customers first. We all are executive owners or executive sponsors of our strategic customers. So we directly deal with customers. Even though I'm primarily responsible for revenue, I spend a lot of time with customers, who are already, deep into their journey with us, right? Way past the acquisition phase. So we've all stayed very much close to our customers. Uh, we pick up the phone and call our customers when we feel like. So it's like just that customer centricity keeps us all together in this journey. And I think that's the key
Yeah.
to driving alignment because then everybody's able to put themselves in the shoes of the customer and envision that journey and then bring back learnings into their respective
Well,
areas.
and be
And then,
exposed to the customer, right? It's just different, right? It's just a hell of a lot different to be even in 2025, where we're not maybe boots on the ground physically with the customers, but to be in those rooms, in those conversations. We have all through our careers been there where you've got like, this is what we have to go tell all the customers. And then you go out and
Yeah.
you have that set of conversations. You come
Yeah.
back, it's like, these are 5 different things that we didn't think about that are actually, are going to kill our idea or kill what we're trying to do, because, you can only get that from being woven in with your customer base. I mean, the SaaS model sort of drives you more to do that because they can kick you out, every year, every month. But few people, I think there's still a lot of space to hide right behind just the offering itself and the every annual reviews or every 6 month reviews. And I think the most, obviously the most intentional companies are doing something much more involved in that. And then it's what you do when you bring that information back into the organization, which
Totally.
was another. Go ahead.
Sorry,
Yeah.
Clark. No, I was just saying another thing is, I mean, these days the tech stack really helps, right? Everything from Gong to we've got our own internal big data repository based on BigQuery called with a front end called Dust, which allows us to go and really look at all the data across the entire life cycle of the customer, everything from the very first call that came in through, say, an inbound channel through our website, to the first few pitches, to the negotiation calls, to actually the
Hmm.
closing calls, to then the onboarding calls, to the touch points that we have with customers, whether it be the quarterly business reviews or other meetings, to expansion opportunities that get discussed. We have so much visibility now. We use, a customer success platform. We've got Salesforce, and all of this is integrated into our central AI repository. So the amount of agility now we have in terms of being able to understand and react is pretty high. But I think the flip side of that is sometimes data lacks emotion, right? So when you see all
Mm.
of this data, you look at it in, too too objective a way rather than looking at it through the lens of a customer. And that's where I think augmenting all of this data and information with a culture where you want everybody to care about the customer helps, right? Our design team, for example, is designing attractive pages for some of our customer sites so that their communities look welcoming, as an
Right.
example.
Yeah.
But the design team also does product design. The design team is also running the design for our marketing side. They could very well put aside the customer side and say, look, we've got too much work on our plates. If
Right.
they take the time to actually, fine tune communities of our customers. So I think that brings a different kind of culture into the organization. We truly care about the communities because we are creating impact through those communities. And so by getting really involved on the front line as much as possible, it brings emotion into analyzing the data, that you're
Yeah.
collecting through all these different
I
channels.
love that emotion, that aspect. And because what you guys are providing, you are the front door for these organizations to many of
Exactly.
their communities. You're not a back office solution. You're not kind of cut and dried and performance and what's the next new
Yeah.
feature that you can crank out. You're kind of joining arms with them at their front door and trying to, whether they are mission oriented,
Mhm.
whether they are, grumpy customers are coming to that door, their customers, etc. You need to. It's a really deep partnership that has. You're right. It's context counts. There's a lot of emotion. There's a lot of pride. There's a lot of uh, there can be frustrating moments
Satisfaction.
happen at that door, which the flip
Yep.
side is satisfaction, right? That's true. That's customer satisfaction, right?
Yep.
I love it. You know what it makes me think about too is, so your your leadership team gets aligned around these things, understands it, builds that culture. How do you plant seeds throughout the organization? How do you get that culture to grow all the way down into your teams as a leader so that the bias is to making decisions with that kind of context? Because you can't be everywhere, right? Particularly in these very distributed organizations that, like, that you've just described, but that many of us have now. We're sitting in home offices, etc. How can you do you have any advice to folks for seeding that culture so that even when you're not there, the right kind of ideas and attitudes are growing?
Yeah, I mean, we spend a lot of time talking about go to market, segmentation, use cases, and all of that, even pricing. So, how the external world perceives you. But I think it's just as important internally as you transition from being a startup to a scale up to have a next level leadership team that can run the business in a way that you would run it, right? And you almost need to know how to step away from the day to day and let them go run with it and be able to let them actually drive it and experience it firsthand. So I think delegation, but at the same time holding them accountable, to the same type of values that you initially, you know, executed on is really critical. So it comes back to people. I think having the right next level leadership across all the teams, very quickly you get sprawled, right? You all get buried in
Yeah.
your little functions. Customer success is chasing success metrics, sales is chasing revenue metrics, product is chasing, just capacity to be able to do more and more with, the number of people that they have. So it becomes very difficult to stay together, just through a single tier of leadership. You need to build a second level of leadership that can really be your extension and your eyes and ears on the ground and keep it together. And they have to be able to be collaborative too among themselves. So it goes back to that same theme of alignment. You drive go to market alignment through things like use cases and segmentation and common data and things and processes, but then you also have to drive alignment through building your culture that way through your next level people.
That's that's terrific. Thank you, Usha. So we've talked. Thank you for doing this deep dive with us into all these different aspects of how you think about leading, how you think about the culture, how you think about growth, and the flywheel of growth. Um, what do you think about when you're not thinking about all of this stuff? What out in the sliver of life that you leave for that's the rest of your life? What are you focusing on these days, or what are you thinking about outside of the world of marketing, of revenue and growth?
You know, I think a lot of executives will say that sometimes our work becomes our life in some ways. Like the separation between work and life is hard, especially when you're having fun at work, right? It's almost like
Right. Yeah.
you live a good part of your life through your work, which is a lot of fun. Obviously, I'm very blessed to be, part of a family with two beautiful children. So I spend a lot of time being a mom. I love baking bread, doing something with my hands and not my brain when I'm not working. So I do that. But then I also spend some time supporting this organization, which is dedicated to building resilience and mental health in adolescents. It's a nonprofit founded by a dear friend of mine who lost her son to depression. And the name of that organization is Shiv's Third Eye. So I spend time working with her, helping her to spread, the mission of her own organization across the local community over here in northern New Jersey. And that's a lot of fun. I don't do it as much as I would like to, but I do it enough to kind of feel the impact myself of the work she's doing. So yeah, that's what I do in my free time.
And I just want to make sure so that everybody gets that. That's Shiv's third eye, right?
It's one word, Shiv's, SHIV, Shiv's Third Eye. Yeah.
That's
The
amazing.
name of her son was Shiv, so um, it's
Mm.
uh, it's in his memory that she founded this
It's
one.
such a crisis. It's such a crisis that's
Yeah,
going on now with this. It's called the anxious generation, right? These kids, these
absolutely.
adolescents, making their way through all of this information, all of this, weaponization of online things, having been developing during COVID. We all had our
COVID was
frustrations about
devastating.
having to sit in our bedrooms instead of go into the office or whatever. But
Yeah.
these kids, all of those neural pathways were getting laid down for them, and that's a That's a terrific,
Yeah,
terrific
and I
cause.
see community in action right over there. So it's almost very inspiring for me to be able to see the power of community, play out in that specific sort of context. But yeah, it's what she does is beautiful, and I love supporting her in that cause.
That's amazing. Good for you, Usha. And thank you, Usha. Thanks for taking time out of obviously very busy days from all the things that we've been talking about to come talk with us on tomorrow's best practices. I really appreciate it. It's great to see you again. It's great to learn from you as always. So thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. It was a pleasure, and have a great 2025. I think it's going to be a turnaround year for many, many companies. 24 was tough, with the whole market going through a big adjustment. But I think
Yeah.
a lot of companies in that scale up phase are now going to experience a new leash of growth. So I look forward to the year. I look forward to, working with you, Clark.
Here's to it. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you, Usha. Take care.